The Almost Daily Zencast proudly presents Good Morning Trumptopia. Well, that didn't go the way I planned, but just tinkering with purple mush and the political outrage, trying to jam out some new sounds. Anyways, welcome to day 600 and something. Or have we already hit 700? Ooh, I failed to set that up. Let's pause here for a moment, folks, and ask the interwebs, how many days has Trump been in office? Because you know what? As much as we gotta get up every day and deal with this, like, insanity on a 24-hour basis, this is a different one than I've seen before. Let's see what this one says. Oh, no, this is the same one, I think. It's day 691 since Trump took office, installed himself in the White House. It's easy to lose track, right? Get up every day, gotta hear about his crazy tweets and how people believe his insane lies and exaggerations and spinning of the truth. For the record, very early on in this entire process, I called out the following observation about Donald J. Trump. The most dangerous thing about this guy, politically speaking, is that he's smarter than he behaves. I think. I could be wrong, but I genuinely believe that he's a wee bit smarter than he lets on, and he's really good at muddying the waters and taking nuggets of truth and smushing them with his twisted lies to make his lies sound believable. I also said very early on that he is a symptomology, not a cause of the madness we're living through. But this photo op that was heard around the world, because that's the funniest part about this moment, this sad, pathetic, awkward moment in Trumptopian political television history, was that it was meant to be for the eyes. It was meant to be, look at us, we're reaching across the aisle, we're gonna be negotiating big deals behind closed doors, aren't we cool, making government great again. And while I failed to catch the very beginning of the discussion, it was clear that they intended to exchange a few barbs to generate, like, a soundbite or two, and it spiraled out of control. And before the moment was over, before the extended exchange calmed down and everything, the three of them, with all due respect owed to them as fellow human beings, the three of them looked like toddler cartoon versions of themselves. My mind literally, if you could imagine a Snapchat filter that makes everything in your photograph look like it's a scene from the Rugrats, that's what happened in my mind. I just saw them cartoonified, rug-ratified. They became these absurd cartoon images of themselves in diapers and swaddling clothes and binkies in their mouths, no offense to these senior leaders of American political blah blah blah, but I think that of all the silly moments in this new dawning political era that we're living through, this one in particular serves as an excellent example of how clear and simple ego hijacking can be. And this is what I mean by it. If you break apart the context, the subtext, if you and of course we could easily fall into the ego trap of projecting, but I'm sharing my thoughts on this as a sort of like, this is what I analyzed out of it. They had a set intended goal, right? A photo op with some polite exchanges, some political exchanges. They probably even had some prepared comments. I wouldn't be surprised, right? It wasn't just journalists with cameras. There was live TV there. And that's one of the things I still relish about television is when strange and unusual moments are caught live, when it's not, there's no way that they staged this, that this is really happening in front of us. And the best they have is like the 30-second, cut off to prevent profanity, etc., etc. This outburst clearly had its moment of opportunity of being what they originally intended. A polite, if somewhat play-actingly contentious photo op moment. They wanted to create that, and they had, up until a certain tipping point was reached, they had the opportunity to just achieve that, call it a win for both sides, and walk away. But all three members there failed. Now, I'm not pretending to be better than anybody else. Anybody who's been a long-time listener knows I've got a big disclaimer about where I come from when I share my opinions on a situation. I'm not out to belittle anybody. I'm not out to judge these people as individuals. I'm talking about what happened in terms of politics and the big meta-spiritual context. Hello, welcome to my show. This podcast is not just about calling out politics and holding politicians accountable for their nonsense. It's about taking a deeper step out in zooming in both directions to address this from not just the pragmatic perspective of you promised this and you delivered that, we got to rectify the difference, but what is at the, openly and honestly discussing what's at the core of all the problems we keep trying to solve. This delightful photo op moment in the Oval Office, I think, serves as a pretty great example of a live, in-action ego trap. They genuinely had it within their power as human beings to achieve a straightforward entertainment political goal, which is take this meeting, look good for both sides, reaching across the aisle, making stuff happen. And then, boom, somebody says a comment that was intolerable, and instead of trying to make peace with it or rolling it into a simple moment that can be a win-win for everybody, tempers start to kick in and people start to lash out, right? Until it gets pretty absurd. Now, this kind of derailment, I humbly suggest, almost always, especially in his own mind, I think, works in Donald Trump's favor. no matter how silly he looks, it works in his favor because the sillier he looks to those of us who already don't like him, I think there's an inverse opposite kind of relationship to how his base responds. The more absurd he looks to us, those of us who disagree and don't approve and resist his tenure in power, to his base, he just looks like he's really doing him. Go you. You're doing you, man. Be crazy, be wild, get it done. And they kind of, gloss over all the details. But I digress. Is this moment in political history important? What did they actually discuss? Well, the President of the United States, for the first time in history, and this is really proof that it is now an ongoing effort to transform this from America to Murica, to complete the transformation. Let me correct myself. To complete the transformation, which has been ongoing for quite some time. From America, from the United States of America to Murica, that's the apostrophe M, Murica, to Trumptopia. I suggest that this is this moment here where he takes ownership of a government shutdown for the first time in the political history of the United States of America. I mean, well, I guess one could say the Civil War was a bit of a government shutdown, but let's not muddy the waters with that, right? Let's keep it simple. For the first time in modern political history, since the 50s, since the place where all these right-wing alternative weirdos want to take the country back to, for sure, in living memory, no president of the United States has ever declared that he would be proud to shut the government down. Now, this harkens back to something that's been an interesting feature of the extreme right for quite some time. Donald Trump did not invent this, but there's been this oxymoronic movement of, hey, you should hate government because I hate government, and we hate government so much you should vote me into office. I hate government. Government's bad. Elect me into government office. It's not only an oxymoron of a recipe to get elected. I think it's an actual legitimate expression of their political aims. They aim to disable the government as it exists as much as possible. Now, what gets confusing about this is that there's a native-grown movement of this form of thinking that has nothing to do with any kind of external influence. And there has been clear and obvious external attempts to manipulate political opinion, not only from Russia, but also the other postmodern members of the newest iteration of the axis of evil. But that's a whole nother can of worms, right? Like, I don't have any direct knowledge. I don't have any evidence. I just think it's kind of obvious that if there's any realistic evidence that factions within Russia or the government, the leadership of the government itself, have an interest in trying to manipulate American pop culture, and there seems to be, mind you, okay? We can get into the debate about whether or not Russiagate is a witch hunt and that the Russian meddling, as the most common ground term applied to it, is all fake news. Or we can, confront the reality that all politics has always had a vested interest in influencing other countries' politics. That's just always been a thing, right? To imagine that there aren't ever any efforts by any country to influence another country's political spectrum, irregardless of which party they just, or which direction they're pushing the pendulum, excuse me, irrespective of which party they infiltrate or which direction they're trying to push the pendulum, most powerful governments, most governments with ambition to greater power, have meddled in that sort of behavior. Let's not be naive. So to dismiss Russian meddling knee-jerk without thought just because Fox News or some other alternative outlet that is basically regurgitating the same stuff Fox News is, which, by the way, sidebar, that happens all the time. And we have to confront our friends on the internet, because we're all fellow human beings here, folks. And when it comes to Trumptopia, we're all fellow Americans. I'm proud to be a member of an American society. Very proud. I love all the good things about what it is or what it means to live here. But we have to hold our own society accountable, right? We have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to hold each other accountable. We have to hold politicians accountable. And we cannot be distracted by the divide and confuse tactics, which painfully and pitifully and obviously pit us against one another, instead of allowing us to build consensus with each other. So, digressing to the original starting point. This, I humbly submit to you, this photo op heard around the world, is yet another political distraction. From what? Well, at one level, I think, quite simply, it's yet another attempt of the many, many endless attempts, almost daily, to shift the media narrative and thus the public narrative, the civil discourse, as it were, away from what's actually going on with the Mueller investigation and what's actually in the content of the documents that have been coming out of the Mueller investigation. Why? Because on the one hand, the more distractions Team Trump throws out there, the more difficult it becomes for anyone, especially his fans, to get any traction with the facts. Right? Like, this is obviously all about pushing us deeper and deeper into a post-fact mindset. Let's just not worry about what's true. As a really freaky example, and mind you, like I said, Trump is just a symptomology of this. He's not the cause. He didn't go to Russia and ask them to do this. The only thing he literally asked Russia to do was on live television, he asked Russian hackers to hack Hillary Clinton's email server, which is hilarious. Because no matter how many times anybody from the right can claim that he's been cleared of any wrongdoing, that act was on live TV, and that act alone is worth, I think, criminal charges. Once, you connect all the dots and you lay out the evidence that within 24 hours of him saying that, emails were being extracted by whatever means they used. I'm not claiming to be a computer expert here. I just understand that as facts go, he said this on live TV, and I called him out on it the day of, or within that week, I think, on an episode. Or maybe, oh God, did I only record it and never post it? That's entirely a possibility. There's a lot of, quote, lost recordings from this year alone, never mind however many other years I've been rambling to myself into a tape recorder. So anyways, digressing. He's done enough out in the open that constitutes or warrants criminal investigation. The reason things move so slowly in this sphere is because of the ridiculous, and mind you, it's not a law, it's not in the Constitution, it's just a memorandum policy. Someone wrote a memo and said, I recommend this be policy. And that's been kept as an ongoing, to be constantly reviewed, is the sort of notion they peddle, but they just keep it there, that the president, a sitting president, cannot be criminally indicted, right? And that's not a law, it's not in the Constitution, that is a memorandum policy of the Department of Justice. Now, it fascinates me to no end that his supporters just turn a blind eye to the level of nepotistic corruption that Trump is meddling with the staffing at the Department of Justice and other connected, and all the government agencies. He's not draining the swamp. He's stockpiling it with more monsters and then getting rid of some of them because they won't play according to his preferences in the swamp. It's ridiculous. His willingness during that meeting with the two Democratic congresspersons, is that the correct way of saying it? Congress people. His meeting with them, the moment when he snapped and I mean, he was, all his body language was that of a bully. It's like, we're gonna shut the government down. We're gonna shut the government down. We're gonna have a government shutdown. I will take it. I will own it. I will do it with pride. These aren't empty threats, and these aren't political maneuverings to gain points. He's, I think, truly interested in just shutting as much of the government down as possible. Is that because the Russians got to him? Maybe. Is it because he comes from a long line of wealth and bigotry? Maybe. Is it a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B? Probably. Does the fact that the Saudis also have a bunch of shit on him somehow or another, and a bunch of money invested, quote unquote, bunny ears, in him? Probably. A little bit of column C, right? So, the investigation that Mueller's running has from the very beginning been something that the opposing team hates. It's been ridiculously thorough, ridiculously efficient, and effective at not leaking, and ponderously slow. It's not in a rush. I compare that to the GOP's Benghazi investigations. Benghazi. How many fucking Benghazi hearings did they have? And how much money was blown on investigating Benghazi again and again? Let's investigate Benghazi again. Woo! Benghazi. They went nuts. Did those investigations ever render any results of any kind? No. In fact, no one likes to talk about them anymore on the right. No one likes to bring up Benghazi because whatever your opinion was, and no matter whichever side's Kool-Aid you drank, the fact of the matter is that the investigations themselves were political stunts. They were actual witch hunts. And all they could find, I imagine that the reason that they all waffled and rendered nothing in the end is that all they could find was generalized corruption on all sides, leading to that tragic failure of security at the embassy in Benghazi. So, as I like to remind folks, especially the fervent ones on the right, because they kind of need it the most, but please forgive me, all my friends on the left, you all need this reminder too. The right wing cannot fly without the left wing. A bird must have two wings to achieve its goals. Another way I like to put it is that Uh, when you, fictionally, mind you, I've never fixed a boxing match. I've never known people personally who literally in real life fixed a boxing match, but understanding the mechanics, theoretically speaking, when you fix a boxing match, you have to pay off both fighters and the referee and the people organizing the event. Otherwise, you will not succeed in pulling off your scam. Mexico was never, will never pay for the wall. The American people might get conned into allowing legislation that requires them to pay for the wall to get on the books, but I think in the long term, they'll ultimately wise up and go, wait, what? No, thank you very much, and not pay for the wall. So to threaten a government shutdown in order to get what he wants, when Mexico's not going to pay for it, the American people's not going to want to pay for it, who's left to pay for it? Nobody. He's not going to pay for it. So there's something else. Now, either the threat is empty or it's serious. And that's scary. And I think just like, and mind you, this hasn't come back up again, but I think it will eventually. This is one of those items on the list of shoes yet to drop. The inaugural parade, in my honest opinion, was a money laundering scheme. They raised an obscene amount of money from their base and from political donor class, and then they blew it on a parade full of tractors and almost zero production value, lighting and fire, none to speak of, effects, right? For the amount of money that they raised and then managed to mysteriously spend, you'd think it would have been a Disneyland, level epic fucking blowout of magic and things and patriotism and dazzling lights and fireworks and marching bands and paid performers and No, it was this dinky ass. There's no other word for it. It looked cheap. It looked cheap and stingy. Like whoever organized it went out of their way to spend as little as money as possible. Now, no one's been talking about this. I'm sure no one that I've come across is talking about this. I'm sure there's people out there talking about this, but this needs to be remembered because I think investigatively, that's one of the many shoes that will suddenly start dropping. Because that's a legitimate crime, right? Like, you can't just swindle the American public out of millions of dollars in the name of this patriotic display that you then put together, a shitty, boring, no offense to everybody that was involved. I'm sure they felt that was the greatest moment of their lives because they probably didn't realize how pathetic it looked on national TV. No offense. I'm not out to offend people. I'm out to say that, I'm out to share my observations about what's going on. So, we need to keep watching that space. Oh, what was my point? My point is, everyone who is convinced that the Mueller investigation, I've heard it pronounced so many different ways on so many different channels. There's a group of people that are convinced that it's winding down and that it's proving nothing, right? And they're there's even people who are convinced of this who swear that they are not getting this from Fox News. But what they don't realize is the content they're regurgitating is Fox News talking points. So wherever they're getting it from, whatever alternative site they're getting it from, that location, that source is just as much a tool of disinformation as Fox News is for whoever runs and operates Fox News. Okay, there's a unified source of nonsense back there. Now, for those of you who know me, you know that this is true. I'm not claiming that the leftist news or the centrist news is more accurate. I do think that all of the news media runs a gambit of sharing with us facts without clouding them and spinning stuff in the direction that they prefer to spin stuff, and that each outlet is its own echo chamber. I don't deny that. But I do think that several media outlets have a much better track record of actually reporting facts, even if they then, in their analysis of the facts or the commentary around the facts, do have a bias or a spin that they generally lean towards. They are reporting facts. Whereas on the spectrum of media, and mind you, I'm not defending corporate media. I know that it's all pretty corrupt. All right? What I am saying is that it's not a totalitarian thing, and I've done a whole episode on it. It's not an absolutist thing, so it's a spectrum. On the spectrum, if you were to line them all up in terms of who peddles the most bullshit and who peddles the least bullshit, Fox News is deep over here in the end of the spectrum of peddling bullshit, of being known for peddling bullshit. So it's not a surprise to me at all by any stretch of the imagination. It's just sort of mind-boggling that they don't see it. Those who come at you, I mean, I'm sure people out there have had this experience. That you get into a conversation or you add your comment to some comment flow, and someone's like, well, you better go do your research because this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And you're like, where are they getting this from? And curiously enough, and again, I don't have international, well, I do have international reach in terms of the kinds of people whose opinions and posts flow through my feed, my multiple social media feeds. But, my reach is limited, is all I'm trying to acknowledge. I know that I don't have a deep and broad exposure, but I do have as much of a reach as I can, starting where I am, right? Working with what I've got. And of the people that I do have a connection with on social media, and mind you, I try to avoid creating my echo chamber in my bias. I try to have a nice overlap of all kinds of diverse views. There's a few things out there that I won't tolerate, and obviously I have to occasionally go through, but I digress. My point is, or the thing I was driving at, is that given the diverse range of people I'm connected to, it's fascinating to see that the only ones that are convinced that Trump is right and the Mueller investigation, the Mueller investigation is a pure witch hunt. The only ones that believe that are somehow, even if they claim not to watch Fox News, regurgitating bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point after bullet point of Fox News talking agenda items. So there's a common source somewhere back there. All right. Now, mind you, I often get accused of sounding exactly like brainwashed MSM sheeple. And MSM, for those of you who aren't aware, is not an ignorant, I don't think, well, maybe it is, who knows. It's not on my part a typo or a wordo, whatever you would call a missaying of MSN, which is Microsoft News, right? Isn't it? Or it's MSNBC, right? Because it's Microsoft and NBC combined. But I digress. There's a movement out there that calls all the media MSM, and it's got something to do with this conspiracy theory that it's all a government psyop. Now, is it? Who knows? Are we already living in Big Brother? Maybe. Maybe. And if we are already balls deep in George Orwell's 1984, the silver lining is that it is not absolutist yet, and that all human endeavors are riddled with human flaws and human, what's the opposite of flaws? Human strengths, human miracles, human magic. But I digress. I need to take a break, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be back in just a minute with some social media observations, etc., etc. Actually, why don't we go ahead and turn to some of that now? Why not? I was going to take a break, but let's just keep on rolling because I've got enough time. Did I have this opened up? Oh, yeah. So I opened up Facebook earlier to my Facebook. And you know how, like every other day, Memories pesters you on Facebook about something you posted? Today, this one seems worthy of reading. If I'm not mistaken, it's one of my oldest memes when I got really serious about making political commentary memes. I could be wrong, and I apologize to anyone else out there if I didn't write this, but I didn't. I'll have to edit that in post. I apologize to anyone else out there if I didn't create this meme, but I feel somewhat certain that I did. From 5 years ago, I'm quoting Chris Hayes commenting on GOP infighting while he's appearing on the Rachel Maddow show, and this is from December 12th of 2013. So Chris Hayes, Rachel Maddow show, December 12th of 2013. And I quote, "This is just classic factionalist politics. Everybody is going to get to everyone's right, and then you can never get far right enough, and you're a sellout if you deviate from party line this amount. There is a psychology to that is fractal. It keeps breaking into smaller and smaller pieces until it is a Hobbesian maelstrom of war of everyone against everyone. And that is where it is heading." So yeah, that assessment by Mr. Hayes from 5 years ago is now something that seems increasingly self-evident to anyone observing the GOP. And arguably, the left receives the same kind of manipulative programming. It's just more deeply sublimated behind the do-goodery of being the left. Both of these political parties have very similar indoctrination programming at their core. And it runs so deep and it's so entrenched in this society that it's really difficult to liberate oneself from it. The evidence of this is that whenever groups of people get dissatisfied with the primary two-party system, they splinter off and create third parties. And guess what? If you dig down and look through the depths of the third party psychological components, us versus them tribalism is inherently there too. Where did it come from? How did it get transferred to this new political party? Why does it seem to manifest everywhere? Because the programming is older than American politics. The programming is older than, Western culture as we know it. The programming is ancient. The us versus them tribalism is ancient. Gonna have to do a whole episode about that, both its ancient roots and how it's clearly utilized in our postmodern context. So tune in for that down the road. I've also got a couple of lost recordings that I should be throwing up soon, and throwing up, that sounds horrible, that I should be posting soon. And what else? I've got the craving to do another unauthorized and explicit readings episode, which is really sort of deep at the heart of the whole project, right? Like, why the reason I have the political opinions that I have is because has got a lot words. They're falling apart right now. The reason I have the political opinions that I have has got a lot to do with the philosophical, spiritual, and metaphysical wisdom or understanding that I've gathered throughout my life through various readings. So, tune in for more of everything, folks. As always, I humbly pray that peace, love, and grooviness are blossoming in your heart, that you may be realizing that all the politics is nonsense, not just the politics that annoys us. Be good humans, folks. Thanks for tuning in.